watch films.
When you think of the British Empire, does it fill you with pride or with shame?
You're just falling into people shouldn't fall into if you just look at all the bad things, and I completely agree, all of those were very bad things. But you look at the fact that we introduced parliamentary democracy to a lot of countries, the sort of civil service system of government, which all of these countries, or a lot of these countries, are still using today. They've stood the test of time.
Well, actually, the point I'm making is this grievously outweighs the deaths of so many people, I mean, India, when it was invaded, had a standard of living comparable to the standard of living of people in this country, and that was drastically declined relative compared to what happened in Britain. In terms of democracy, well, lots of places which were invaded not just by Britain but by other European countries, the legacy of that are wars and conflicts because of policies of divide and rule.
In the narrative of Paddington, Nicole Kidman's character's main interest, as her job is a taxidermist, is capturing and exhibiting exotic wild animals. This is, of course, where the character of Paddington comes into the story. I believe this to be a commentary on the capture and exploitation of people throughout the world by the British Empire. By stealing both culture, people, and resources, they want to explore the profit that they have gained off the backs of the exploitation of fellow human beings and their culture. The selling of other people's culture, the selling of other people specifically. So in that, we take the capture and exploitation of the character of Paddington as an allegory for what the film is really talking about. Potentially. I don't know if the filmmaker Paul King actually did want to explore that as a theme. Clearly, I feel like he's kind of circling topics close to it, but I don't know if he particularly wants to criticize colonialism and imperialism. We still profit off of the acts of things that I don't think it's an accident that the main characters, the Browns, are a middle-class white family. They get to ignore the things that have led to them living such a nice life in modern 21st century Britain. The main villain is obsessed with profiteering off of the exploitation of other species. That very much is the case now, where you will see big brands exploiting cultures so that they can profit off of that. It still happens today. It hasn't gone away. So when I talk about the people represented throughout the British Empire and throughout the colonies of the British Empire, I do also touch quite heavily on Paddington 2. Paddington is framed for a robbery that he did not commit and is thrown into jail. So that's Paddington 2. And then in the jail, he forms a gang with these supposedly toughened criminals, who they are tough, they are mean, but deep down, they've got hearts of gold. So you know it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, don't worry. They always turn out to be the good guys. These people represent many of the colonies of the Commonwealth and of the British Empire. At least if we're going by this, we're gonna look. I've decided that I'm gonna talk about Paddington's portrait of the British Empire, and I'm gonna stick to it. Okay, I'm sticking to this. So those three characters, I'm saying they're not a coincidence. I'm saying this director chose to cast those people depending on where they were from. What I like is these characters are so minor apparently that I need to go onto the second page to find out the second page of Wikipedia to find out who plays these people. So Brendan Gleeson's in there. Yeah. So the characters of Brendan Gleeson as Knuckles McGinty, Aaron Neal as Spoon, and Noah Taylor as Fibs represent the people that existed within the Empire, okay? These characters come together towards the end of Paddington 2 to help each other out and help each other solve the crime. So these bands of misfits representing the British Empire band together and they beat the villain. And the evils of the world are often overcome by the masses coming together and kicking them out. It's Britain's diverse nature coming together, the multicultural mixing pot, finally gaining all the powers. It's like the Power Rangers. They all have their rings on and they put it together and they fight the giant lizard, which is representing the evils of imperialism. What's the thematic evil that they are fighting in this? Maybe greed, maybe exploitation, perhaps. But whatever the evils are, they've gathered together the beautiful British mixing pot with no problems. They all just got together and they fought off the bad guys. And this obviously could be seen as how they literally did that in World War One and World War Two. All of the colonies coming together and fighting for the British Empire against one evil. I mean, that works better in World War One, but then it also doesn't, because World War One was kind of seen as this war where the young men were kind of pointlessly sent to die for no good reason. Maybe that's why I'm struggling to think of what the actual evil is, in the same way that we struggle to think of what was the real point. Why did they send all those young people to die during World War One? This is further exploitation of these people dying in the name of an empire they don't necessarily believe in, or have been brainwashed into believing truly supports them and validates them, when really they just want to exploit off of their resources, their hard work, their labor, and off their bodies, and just so the rich can get richer and the poor can die. I mean, I think that's one of my issues with this film, is that it raises these issues. It kind of hints at Britain's colonial past, but I feel like it still wants to be nostalgic in a way. It still wants to enjoy that old form of colonialism, that idea that we should all be together under one umbrella. And I feel like that's only there because people were forced to move in together. They were forced to seek a better life in Britain after their own nation had been vandalized and pillaged by the British Empire. So if we look at Peter Capaldi's character, Mr. Curry, in both of the films, he is clearly a stand-in for the stereotypical sort of Middle Englander who hates immigrants and hates people coming to this country. to this country. I don't live in the UK anymore. I live in China, so I don't know why I said this country, but usually when they're talking about this country as in the UK, not as in China, where I live. He uses analogies and he uses kind of dog whistles. There's a lot of dog whistle language to talk about who he doesn't, why he doesn't want Paddington to be there. Kind of talking about you lot, dark marauders in the neighborhood, and playing loud jungle music, all that sort of nonsense. Clearly kind of mocking the tone of these sorts of people that often are bigots and often are racist. So they'll steal your land and you can come live here, but we don't want you to come here. We just want to take your stuff. And if you could not come to where your stuff is, if you could not come to where we're feasting on the bounty of your resources, that would be great. Is kind of the mentality, it seems, sometimes. So the villains of Paddington often adopt the very similar language that was adopted by the party UKIP, which is famous for its right-wing rhetoric, for its bigotry, for its xenophobia. UKIP used a lot of imagery, a lot of language, to denote a danger that was coming into the country. 52% of people voted for Brexit. And I think what that said about the country, not everyone who voted for Brexit was a racist, but a lot of racists voted for Brexit. A lot of xenophobes voted for Brexit. One thing that I found particularly depressing is what that says about Britain, what that says about British people. It's this idea Paddington kind of tries to portray the British people as generally we're all embracing, we'll always welcome you in, it's a great melting pot. But really, you know, there's a horrible underbelly of xenophobia and racism in the UK, and that leads back to its colonialist past. It goes back to its racist origins. I know it's a kids' movie, but for Paddington to go so close, why explore those ideas? The fact that the first Paddington was made pre-Brexit is very telling. I guess they didn't have enough time because Paddington 2 only came out the next year. I mean, Paddington came out nearly 18 months later, so perhaps it did have enough time to comment on Brexit and try to kind of paint this picture of portraying, you know, a lot of the imagery that was used and is used by the right wing evokes that kind of stern Britishness of World War I, of World War II. Maybe it's an attempt to kind of try and evoke that imagery, evoke that idea of people coming together to be British, trying to kind of cling on to this idea of Britain being this beautiful melting pot of cultures, which it is. It really is that. But not everyone in Britain sees it that way. I love how many cultures there are in the UK. But depressingly, not everyone in Britain has that opinion. And I understand it's for children. It's a children's movie. But if you don't want to confront these themes, why bring them up as themes? Maybe Paddington just wants to ask these questions. Point you in the direction. Think about the colonial past of the UK. Think about what the British Empire means and what it means to be British. What it means to come from a nation that had an empire that exploited people and resources and animals at one stage. And in a way still does. Can we learn from our past mistakes, and can we move forward and do better things now? I want to finish this on a more positive note. If you haven't seen anything by Paul King, he's the director of the film. If you haven't seen the Paddington films, I would recommend watching the Paddington films. They're really fun. This analysis makes it seem like I really didn't enjoy the film. The two Paddington films are some of my favorite films that I've watched recently. I watched Paddington 2 finally the other day, and I had a great time watching it. Paul King also did this amazing film called Bunny and the Bull. He made this a couple of years before Paddington. It's really inventive, it's really creative, made on quite a small budget, but they make that budget go a long way. They tell a really beautiful story. It's really interesting, it's really fun, it's really funny. Paul King is one of the most inventive, interesting filmmakers working today, and I'm always excited to see what he does next. Whatever he does next, I can't wait to see it. And if you love film, if you love comedy, if you love British comedy, I'd recommend look him up, Paul King, watch everything he's done. That's my little weird rant that you can, watch films. So anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. Any comments are really appreciated. If you want to give me feedback, if you have me on social media, I'm going to put all my details down below. Feel free to add me. If you already have me, drop a message.